There's an old Chinese proverb that says, if it's worth watching, it's worth binge watching. And I'm not even talking about, this episode of Guitar Quackery, which, well, you should be watching, which you are clearly watching. I'm talking about watching something else. So let me explain what happened tonight. I was getting mentally ready to record a new episode of this episode of Guitar Quackery. But, you know, as I sat down by my computer, instinct took over. So I just clicked on Netflix to check what's on Netflix tonight. And what do I see? A brand new season of Better Call Saul, my favorite Netflix show. So, yeah, clearly that's good news. But when I saw that, I said there's no way that I'm going to record anything tonight, because I'll just binge it. I had to find the mental discipline to not click play and to turn off Netflix and start recording this, which I'm doing as we speak, as I speak to you. Yeah? Because I love you. Well, you love me too, right? How much? Enough to click thumbs up, share, subscribe, or even buy me a coffee? There's a link to do that, right? Or become a patron. So welcome back to Guitar Quackery, where we use scientifically proven methods to, well, in this case, do a setup on this baby. Remember this? This beautiful Kramer 405. Yeah, I called it a 405 bass in the previous episode. It's a 450. I don't know why I said 405. 450B. We're going to do a setup on this Kramer bass. And this is going to be an episode just about doing a setup on a Kramer 450B. So first, let's have a look at the tools that you need to do a setup on it. You won't need a truss rod wrench, I tell you that much. Those are all the tools you'll need. Flathead screwdriver. It has to be a slim one so that it fits inside the slot. 2 Allen keys. This one will be used for saddle height adjustments. So the screwdriver is used for intonation adjustments on each individual saddle. This one is for action adjustments. So that's a 1/16 of an inch size. And here the other one is for pickup height adjustments. And as you can see, that's 3/32 size. All right, don't try to use metric. Always use the right size tools, okay? Here we have, we only need a 12-inch radius gauge, okay? Now that you are watching this video, you know it's a 12-inch, you will know it's a 12-inch radius, so you will not need the other ones to determine what radius you have on the fretboard. But I will show you how to use them in order to determine that it is in fact a 12-inch radius, okay? So now, you will also need a set of feeler gauges. It does not matter if they're metric or inch imperial size. You need a very thin one. It doesn't have to be thinner than this, okay? So you see what size this is. And for string height or action adjustment, you will need a string action gauge. Now, I'm just showing 2 different ones. I will use this one because it shows up better on video. It's less reflections. And I'm a metric guy, but I typically use the decimal inch scale for the action. It's just because the numbers are really, easy to deal with, right? It goes from 10 to 140. And the string height, typically, I do on a bass. On the treble side, 81 thousandths. On the bass side, 101 thousandths. Now, of course, for different players, it might be different. In metric, this corresponds to 2 millimeters about, and 2.5 on the bass side. So yeah, that is really all you will need. All right, so now we put the bass here. I also have a neck rest, right? Do you know what that is? It's, I forgot to show you this. I'm holding the bass. It's one of those things. It doesn't have to be that. If you don't have a neck rest, just roll up a towel. It works fine. So here we have this nice Kramer bass. First things first. Normally, we would adjust the truss rod at the beginning of a setup. In this case, we won't do that because this neck has no truss rod. It's an aluminum or aluminium neck, and it was built without a truss rod. So there's nothing you can do if you have a back bow. Well, not easily, right? That's it. But we do want to look at the nut. So let's move it over here. Let's put the microscope over the nut. Okay. We are looking at the E string. All right, I'm moving it here. Let's loosen the string and look at the nut. Ooh, how horrible. Just kidding. It has a 0 fret. So this nut doesn't have to be filed precisely. Yes, it has to be filed precisely, but we don't need to really file the bottom precisely. It's a different story. But this is what I want to point out here, okay? So if you have too much fret wear on the 0 fret, you will have some buzzing, even if you don't have a back bow. And that's because the string is going to be hitting the first fret when you play the open string. So let's put the string back here. And this gives us an opportunity to explain why a 0 fret tends to get this kind of fret wear. Look what happens when you tune the bass. Right? So every time you tune, as you can see, it wears down this fret. So we could look at the other string slots. It's really not that important to look at them under a microscope, but here it is. We just show it. Just for fun, let me show you the D string. Okay, as you can see, you have fret wear here. All right, let me put the strings back. So one thing I want to show you is this nail. This is how they mounted this nut on this neck. And that's because it's metal to metal, so they couldn't use glue. It's not very aesthetically pleasing, but that's how they did it. All right, so First thing we have to do is tune the strings that we've loosened, because we even if we can't adjust the relief, we should just measure it, just so that we know that we do have a relief, okay? And we need to measure our relief under string tension. Okay, so now I've tuned the bass, the two strings that, we looked at the nut. So I am going to look at the relief, in this case, as I'm holding the bass, right? Just like that. Okay, here we go. So let's talk about relief first. Since the strings are pulling the neck in this direction, the neck will bend slightly like bow and arrow. We don't want the neck to be perfectly straight. We'll talk about this in another video, why not, and all that. So we want to have a little bit of bowing, okay? That's called a relief. One way to measure neck relief is to use the string, which is always straight. If you don't have a straight edge, typically we would put a capo on the first fret, but we don't need to do that because we have a 0 fret, and then fret down the string on the last fret and measure a space between the middle of the neck is the 8th fret, about there. Okay, there's that little space. We measure that space using feeler gauges. Now, I already know what it is because I measured it. It happens to be 12 1/1007 inch, 0.3 millimeters, which is pretty perfect for a bass, yeah? 4-string bass. So here we want to measure that, so I'm fretting it here, and I can fit this feeler gauge through without lifting the string. Okay, it's a little harder to do when I'm doing it on camera, etc., right? But I measured this precisely before. Now, if I try to fit the next one, which in this case is 14 1/1007 inch or 0.35 millimeters, I'm going to notice that it's lifting my string when I try to push it through, okay? So we do have a really good relief for bass. We want to measure the treble side as well, just to make sure that the neck is symmetrical, right? I've done that, it's good. This neck is good to go, all right? Next thing we need to measure. So on a normal setup, we might want to file down the string slots on the nut to make sure the strings are not too high off the fretboard, because that would make it hard to play. It would also change the pitch on the first 2 or 3 frets, because we would be stretching the string down to hit the fret before we can even play it. So on this bass, there is a 0 fret, so we have nothing to adjust on the nut, but we do want to make sure that we have clearance between the string and the first fret when we touch the second fret. Let me show you what I mean. All right, so the string is resting on a 0 fret. Typically, a 0 fret is higher for many reasons. One reason is the fact that the 0 fret wears down quite quickly. So we want that to be initially higher, so that when it does wear down, it doesn't go too low too quickly. So now we want to fret between the 2nd and 3rd fret here, okay? And tap the string. We hear how it hits the fret. So that means that there is a little space between the string and the fret. We want to do this on every string. I'm not sure how much this microphone picks up. We could measure this, etc. But right now, we just want to confirm that we don't have a zero fret that's worn down too low, because that would cause buzzing over the first fret when we play an open string, okay? Okay, so next we want to put the bass on the bench. And now we want to measure with a radius gauge, okay? We want to measure the fretboard radius, because we are going to use the same radius gauge to match the radius on the bridge later, okay? To measure the fret radius, we use a radius gauge. In this case, I already know this to be a 12-inch radius, so I'll show you how I was able to determine that. Basically put the radius gauge between the strings and one of the frets, push down, take a very thin feeler gauge, the thinnest one you have, and try to put it on the sides. It does not fit, okay? In the middle, it does not fit between the radius gauge and the fret, yeah? So now, that's a 12-inch radius. If we take bigger radius, it means that it's straighter than 12-inch. We will have a different situation, yeah? So in this case, we are able to fit the feeler gauge on the side and also on the other side, yeah? But not in the middle, right? And if we have the opposite situation, if we take, let's say, a 10-inch radius gauge, it means it is more curved than a 12-inch, which is what the fret is. In this case, we are unable to fit the feeler gauge on the sides, but it does fit between the fret and the radius gauge, yeah? So, we know that we have a 12-inch radius on the frets, and we're going to use this radius gauge to set up the same radius on the bridge by placing the radius gauge underneath the strings, okay? I'll show you this in a moment. All right. Let's talk about the order in which we need to do a setup on a guitar or a bass. We measure our neck relief first and set it up if we can, not in this case, right? Next, we measure, not action, how high off of the fretboard are the strings close to the nut. If you need to file the nut, if you have an instrument without a zero fret, you need to file it. If you're a tech, you need to charge extra for that because filing the nut should not be part of a regular setup. Setup should just be regulation and alignments, yeah? Next, you work on the bridge. So if you have individual saddle adjustments, you would do those first, but in this case, we have a slightly unusual bridge because we also have a string spacing adjustment. So I would do that first on the bridge, and then I would do saddle heights. We have 4 individual saddles, so you adjust the height of the treble side, then you adjust the height of the bass side, and then you use the radius gauge underneath the strings to touch the 2 sides that you've just adjusted and lower the middle strings onto the radius gauge. And then you do the intonation. Now, the bridge, the mechanical setups are finished. Now you need to do pickup height, and cleaning and all that is done before, but that's not really a setup. So let's look at this bridge and let's do some setup adjustments on it. All right, so first thing, we adjust string spacing, yeah? So in the interest of time, I've already done that. So I'm going to show you just how it works. So these saddles have rollers, and these rollers are mounted on threaded rods. So when you turn them one way, they go one way, and when you turn them, spin them the other way, they go the other way, yeah? So how do you adjust string spacing? First, you do your treble side and your bass side. Basically, you adjust it up and down so that the string doesn't slip off of the fretboard on each side when you play. Yeah. Once these two strings have been properly adjusted, you adjust the middle two by making sure that the string spacing, the three spaces, are equal. Now, that means that these two strings will be further apart, measured center to center, than these two strings. And that's because these two strings have a certain thickness that eats into the string spacing. I don't know how to explain this, but that's something that is also important to understand when you cut a nut, and I'll talk about this in another video. So once you have the spacing done, you have to adjust string height. So you do your treble side and your bass side first. We have to do this in playing position, but before we do that, we need to raise these two saddles further up. And that's because once we are done adjusting the heights of these two strings, we are going to use our radius gauge, put it underneath the strings, and lower these two strings onto the radius gauge to match the 12-inch radius of our fretboard. Okay? To properly adjust string height, which is called the action, we really need to put the instrument in playing position. And we measure, most people measure at the 12th fret. Again, there are different techniques. I'm going to show you the 12th fret technique. And for this, we're going to use our string action gauge, which means string height gauge. So we will use the Allen key to adjust the height, and we are going to use the string action gauge to measure on the 12th fret. Let's look at that. All right, so at the 12th fret, we want to get 100/1000th of an inch. Now, this string is above the desired measurement, right? So we need to lower the saddle a little bit. I'm doing it now. That's off camera. Yeah, we adjust both sides of the saddle to get 100. Yeah, a little bit more. That's it. So once we adjust 100 on this side, we want to adjust 80 on this side here, which I've already done, so we're good to go. Next measurement, which is matching the radius, is done on the bench. Once again, I place the bass on the bench, and let me show you the bridge. This time I'm going to use our 12-inch radius gauge. Okay, so here we go. We place our 12-inch radius gauge underneath the strings. I have to hold it like this for the camera, or maybe I can hold it this way, I don't know, like this, so you can see it. You can just pluck the string and lower the saddle until you hear that it hits the radius gauge. Okay, we heard that. We want to make sure that the saddles are not crooked. Okay, so I'm looking from this side, And I can see that the saddle is parallel to the bridge plate. We do the same adjustment on the A string. Okay, but I went too low on this side, so I have to raise it. Okay. Again, I can see from here. I don't want to bother repositioning the camera. I'm sure you understand. We've adjusted string spacing, string height, which is the action. Now we need to do the intonation. To properly set up the intonation, we must hold the bass in playing position, because we'll be playing it in this position, and that's when we want the intonation to be just right. So you will need to use your ears and a precise tuner. This little thing is not going to cut it. One popular tuner is the Peterson strobe tuner, but it's expensive. To be honest, the GarageBand free tuner is just as good, if not better. Better because it even shows you how many cents you're off. And that's the tuner. Although I have a Peterson, lately I've just been using GarageBand. Let me show you. So, I already set up the intonation on 3 strings in the interest of time, and we need to set up the intonation on the G string. So here, let's turn on the tuner and play the G string. Here we go. All right, it's already in tune. Now, on the 12th fret, it's flat. So now we need to move the saddle in this direction, yeah? Because it's flat. So we need to make it sharper. Huh? To move the saddle, we use a flathead screwdriver, and we turn the screw counterclockwise. I kind of know already where the saddle needs to be, because I prepared for this video. So let's see if I hit it. Okay. We first need to make sure the string is in tune, because we just moved the saddle. That's the harmonic. Okay, now the 12th fret. We're good. Okay, I can fine tune it later, but in the interest of time, let's just move on with the program. Now, once we are done with the intonation, all the mechanical setup alignments have been completed. Now we need to set up the pickup height. On a more conventional bass, we would set up the pickup height by adjusting some screws on the top, but this is a Kramer bass. The pickup height adjustments are on the back. We need to use an Allen key right here. Now look at this nice neck. So I'm going to place the bass upside down to show you how the pickup height is adjusted. All right, so these are the mounting screws for the pickups. All you need is an Allen key, and then you turn it. If you tighten it, it pulls the pickup towards the back, right? So the pickup goes lower. If you loosen it, it raises the pickup at the front, and that's about it. So how do you adjust it? We adjust the pickups in playing position. So why don't I show you from this angle here? I look at the distance between the bottom of the string and the surface of the pickup, yeah? Both sides, both pickups, right? But let's talk about this string here. So in theory, we want to be able to play even this fret, yeah? So when we fret it down, we need to have a space. I eyeball about 1/8 of an inch or so, okay? So now, that's to start to begin with, yeah? So now we need to listen. So some players might want the treble side to be louder than the bass side or the other way around, depending on the style of music. Some players might want the bridge pickup to be slightly louder than this one. So pickup height will alter the volume. And once again, if we want to make the pickup louder, we need to raise it like that, right? And if we feel that it's already too loud, then we need to pull it away from the string in this direction. But I've already adjusted the pickup height. So I don't know what else there is to be done on this bass. Well, I have an idea. How about we play it? Okay, my friends, we've come to the end of this episode of Guitar Quackery. Thank you very much for your support. Please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, share. If you wish, you can support me financially, buy me a coffee, or, support me on Patreon. Those links are below. Oh, I also sell merch. There's a link below. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.